What's up, party people? How's it going? I'm doing a quick stream here to respond to a video from Majesty of Reason, where he's talking with Dr. Felipe, I think I'm saying that right, Leon. By the way, I'm a big fan of the channel Majesty of Reason. Lots of interesting discussion over there. In particular, I want to address what I've viewed so far, the time range around the 25-minute mark to around the 40-minute mark. I think prior to 25 minutes wasn't super related, and then I don't know what's going to happen subsequent, but I have a movie date. So I just wanted to get this idea off my head. May follow it up with a blog article. It's certainly underdeveloped at the moment. But basically, the idea here is that I don't buy Platonism, and I have a reason for this, and I'll get to it. And I think I can solve the bootstrapping problem with a single story that defeats Platonism and solves this bootstrapping critique they raise. And so basically, the argument from Abstracta is that I just reflect, and I'm coming at this from a software developer perspective, right? So if I think of abstract objects, I think we actually have really good representations of these in programming. So I can literally define an object, and I can define it abstractly. And I can create the Platonic forms in software, and I can instantiate the Platonic forms into instances. And so like in software, we have the concept of, we call them classes, but they're essentially Platonic forms. And they live in this informational plane that only information can describe, and they're not physical entities. So I think we actually have like a really clear grasp of how to implement and define these Platonic forms. And it becomes clear that they simply are informational constructs, no more, no less. The forms are not physical entities, they're informational constructs. To the extent that they exist anywhere, they exist in the minds of, I would say, people, perhaps God as well, but they exist in minds, right? For the most part, human minds. So this basically answers the question, like where do abstract objects come from? They're in our minds. So abstract objects are compositions of information. The interesting thing here is reflecting on what is information. And I think, at least so far, Majesty of Reason has not discussed what information is. So there's many ways to define information. I think one of the best ones is the idea of Shannon information. So Shannon information is a measure of the uncertainty that is reduced by a message. So you measure information, and this is like bits and bytes. When we talk about software, information theory, this is what we're talking about in information. And we can actually represent anything this way. I can represent those Platonic forms. I can represent that as a software algorithm. So this is like actually a serious thing. It's not some like distant analogy. It's literally, I can crystallize what they're saying in a language, which is a programming language, that is much more precise and clearer than even our English language. The syllogisms, all of this can be represented functionally, we would say. That is to say, in using a programming language. And Shannon information is not some abstract idea that may or may not be related. It can technically be mapped to the same software. You can measure the Shannon information content of a software application, say. Like I can tell you how many megabytes my program is, right? And what we mean by that is that it is providing a message that eliminates uncertainty. So we can also think about this like it really applies everywhere. And I'm trying to communicate the breadth of applicability here, so that even when I'm looking around and the picture in front of me changes because my eyeballs are receiving different light content signals. When we say that in English vernacular, we would say that I'm getting information. Like I forgot what's over there. I may have some idea of what's over there, but it could be right, it could be wrong. I look and I have a very clear picture because I'm looking directly at it. Even there's some measurement error. Maybe it's like hard for me to read the clock, and I think it says 4 when it really says 9 on the clock, digital clock, something like that. But what's happening is that there is positive information gained. Shannon would call that a message or a signal, and there's uncertainty lost. And so he was into like code breaking, and you could combinatorial mathematics. You can actually determine the number of possible things that just like a random number of letters, like how many combinations of letters could even exist, right? Combinatorial mathematics can tell you that. So you will get the probability space. And then when you figure out what it actually means, you're sort of decoding layer by layer. So that's how we can actually measure this stuff. And we do the same thing. We do the same thing with software. So if I have a program, it's usually represented in characters. It can also be bytes. There has to be some representation. And then there is like a processor, like your browser. So there's an observer. And so the point is this. The point is that Shannon information implies the existence of a message, of an observer, and of time and change. If any of those things don't exist, then you can't have information. If information is a reduction in uncertainty, if it's telling you anything, that means you have to be told. For you to be told, someone has to be telling you. It doesn't have to be a person, right? But there has to be some signal, there has to be some observer, and there has to be the idea of change, that when I'm looking around, I'm seeing different things. If I never saw different things, there would be no information. What would information even mean? There would be no discovering anything. There would be no communicating anything, because there would be no change in perception or in emission of information, neither in emission nor in reception. So we need change, and that change requires time. Now, here's the interesting part about time, is that we know that space-time is a thing. So time is bound to matter in the physical universe. And this ties back to the bootstrapping thing. So abstract objects exist in minds. Human minds, even to perceive information, even if it's not human minds, it could be like animal minds or something, whatever, like they see colors. All of these things are bounded within a spatiotemporal process, which is the physical universe, okay? And God is not. That's not what we mean by God. God is the creator of the universe. We have really great evidence. See the Kalam cosmological argument. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. And that cause is what we mean when we say God. Could get into a whole bunch of different religious debates I'm not trying to get into. Let's just stick to that Kalam. The thing which created the universe exists outside of space and time. Let's just go with that. It's causally potent. So it's immaterial, spaceless, timeless, and causally potent. And because it's timeless, it's atemporal. That is eternal. So any point the physical universe does exist, an atemporal observer would be able to view all temporal possibilities from an atemporal perspective. Kind of like I have this phone, right? It's like a three-dimensional object, but I can view it in a two-dimensional way. Like I kind of just look at it and I just see like a plane. In the same way, something which was outside of time. So time is like a dimension. It's like a physical dimension. There's like length, width, height, and time is actually another dimension. I know that's kind of weird to think about it like that. But if you could freeze time, there'd still be three dimensions. There would just be nothing changing. Like everything's frozen, right? So time is like this fourth dimension. So, and then whatever, we could get into physics. I think physicists say that the universe has a minimum of like 8 dimensions, and that it could be more, but like that's the minimum we need for like our physical models. So this entity would be outside of the 4 dimensions, length, width, height, and time. And so from that perspective, you could actually see all the 3-dimensional snapshots. You're an atemporal being. And so this solves for omnipotence, basically. And this is a non-traditional theistic account of bootstrapping of omnipotence. And so it's non-traditional because so I'm not like really stuck on this, but it's just an idea I had. but it's non-traditional in the sense that omniscience would be emergent, but it's weirdly emergent because it emerges over time on the part of the observer who is an atemporal being. So you could also say the being always had this information, right? So in one sense, omniscience is emergent, but in another sense, the being always had this omniscience because the being exists outside of time. But sort of in an ontological way, not in a chronological way, but in an ontological way, they would attain omniscience, at least about the physical universe, as a result of creating the physical universe, which kind of makes sense too, right? Like, how can I know about my chair if I never built my chair? There has to be a chair to know about the chair. I might know about the possibility of a chair, but that's different than concretely knowing about the chair, right? So this would be a concrete omniscience where God actually knows all the brute facts of the universe because he's observing it, because he created it. So it would be an emergent, concrete omniscience. And it solves for the bootstrapping. So, and this is against Platonism. So Platonism would say there are numbers and universals and like redness. Let's stick with redness. What is redness? Redness is an abstract object in the mind of humans. Could be in the mind of God. Let's set that aside. It's at least in the mind of humans. And I think it's even from an apologetic point of view, it's easier to appeal to the mind of humans because even the secular acknowledges that redness exists in them. Even the solipsist acknowledges that redness exists in the mind of at least their own human mind. So we know that redness is this like abstract property in the Platonic and Aristotelian sense, but we also know at a more modern scientific sense that redness is the observation by the eye of a particular light wavelength. Once we have that secondary, later progressed understanding, it becomes really, really trivial to realize that this is not a Platonic thing that eternally existed. It's emergent from physical matter, so that if no light existed, there would be no red, right? If I did not have my eyeball and I could not perceive, my brain would have no concept of red. So it becomes really trivial to imagine possible worlds where redness doesn't exist. All that you need is a world with no light, or all that you need is a world with no eyeballs, I guess. I was going to say no physical matter, but then it's almost like a question like, if there's no physical matter, is there a world at all? I don't want to go down that rabbit trail. Let's just stick with the concept that we know that redness is the perception by the eyeball of a particular wavelength. So all you need is a universe without that wavelength, or all you need is a universe without eyeballs. And now you have no redness. The concept would not exist. So this is a demonstration that abstracta are emergent. And so they are contingent on God. They're contingent specifically on the physical universe. And in fact, all information is contingent on the physical universe. So information is like a co-important thing with space and time. It's like space, time, and information. Or really, information is a description of spatiotemporal relations. Okay, so that's the thing that I wanted to go on. This basically shows that like universals are still contingent on the physical universe. We know that the universe began to exist. We have like dated the universe and stuff. Like it started at a certain beginning. This is another thing that like Plato and all the Greeks would have been wrong about. A lot of them thought the universe was eternal. Frankly, a lot of just non-Christians thought the universe was eternal, or like non-monotheists thought the universe was eternal until like, I don't know, the modern age, basically. So I really don't think, to Majesty and Reason and to Dr. Felipe Leon and really to a lot of our like philosophers, I think this is just a case where there are some scientifically relevant facts that need to be included. And I think it really does away with a lot of these logical points that could be made, but the points are all contingent on like these possibilities, but it's like we actually know some stuff. So plug it in, discount the possibilities that rely on the lack of things that we don't know, or that would be contingent on actual scientific facts. So I think if we integrate science and philosophy more, we can discount some of the scientifically implausible logical possibilities. And I think that's really important. I think the objections from Platonism are objections from logically possible contingents that become essentially untenable once we include some science in there. So that's my bootstrapping answer, is let's tie it back to the physical universe. Like real rough summary, the pattern is go from abstract objects to information to physical material to the universe had a beginning, but God didn't, so they're ontologically inferior, and straight Platonism is impossible. So I think that could be cleaned up. I haven't formed a syllogism out of it yet, right? The universe beginning thing, you could do that the Kalam way. Yeah, and the real key there is the leveraging of abstract objects into information, which we know they are, and then the leveraging of information into Shannon information, which implies message, observer, change, and time, which then implies nesting within the physical universe. And once you can do that nesting within the physical universe, the problem is solved, right? You no longer have these competitors with God, these sort of like eternal rocks. That's just like a thing that doesn't exist. Cool. All right. I think I've made my point pretty clear. Thanks for tuning in.